Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Sip&Talkers. Wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in right now, welcome back to Sip&Talk. I am in a fantastic mood today, just completely full of energy.
You definitely seem fired up today. I'm just trying to keep up over here with my coffee.
I am, because, okay, let me just tell you, after our last show where we talked about the dangers of secondhand smoke, our comment section absolutely blew up. Like completely exploded.
Oh, yeah. People were definitely not holding back. The collective trauma is real.
It's beyond real.
Yeah.
The level of outrage about secondhand and thirdhand smoke was wild. I saw comments from people saying they'd be walking down the street, suddenly hit a literal smoke bomb, and just they wanted to pack up and move to a new city.
Right.
People were actually begging us to create some kind of like an anti-smoke street map for the U.S. and Taiwan just so they could navigate the sidewalk safely.
Look, I'm just going to say it. If we could actually build a Google Maps plugin that perfectly routes you around every cloud of secondhand smoke, we would not be sitting here recording a podcast right now.
We'd be rich.
We'd be in Silicon Valley, standing in front of investors, pitching for millions of dollars in seed funding. I mean, that is a billion-dollar startup idea.
Right. Come on, I'm being serious, though. There is this massive collective sense of being a victim, this feeling of, I work out, I eat my greens, I take care of my health. Why on earth am I being forced to inhale toxic chemicals just because I wanted to walk to the post office?
Exactly. And that anger is completely justified because the core issue there, the real pain point, is a total lack of consent, informed consent.
Yes. Lack of consent.
You have absolutely zero choice, and that harm is just forced straight into your lungs. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, while everyone is furiously dodging smoke clouds on the sidewalk, they are totally missing something else.
Well, here we go.
No, I mean it. People hate secondhand smoke, but there's a very good chance that every single day you are voluntarily actively doing something that carries comparable systemic risks. And the crazy part, you're actually paying good money to do it.
Okay, wait. Are you talking about my morning hazelnut latte? Or the bag of Doritos I have stashed in my desk?
I'm talking about both. I'm talking about ultra-processed foods, UPFs, and specifically the complex chemical additives that come inside them.
Whoa, hold on. You can't just group those together. Like if I buy a bag of chips, I can flip it over and read the label. The ingredients are right there. That's informed consent, right? I'm eating it because I want to be happy for 5 minutes.
But are you really giving informed consent? I mean, think about it. You grab a standard bag of American potato chips, you look at the back, and what do you see? Silicon dioxide, MSG, erythrocene, yellow 5, yellow 6, azotic carbonamide.
Okay, wow.
Right. If I didn't tell you that was a list of ingredients for a snack, you would probably think I handed you a classified NASA formula for rocket fuel.
Or like something you'd use in a clean room to manufacture the next generation of AI chips. I mean, silicon dioxide. That sounds insane. But actually, I do know that one. It's just what is it called? An anti-caking agent, right? It just stops the powder from absorbing moisture.
Exactly. It makes sure the seasoning at the bottom of the bag doesn't turn into a solid brick. But the issue isn't just the crazy names of these chemicals. The real issue is that the global regulations for these additives are completely fractured. It's like different countries are living in totally different parallel universes.
Which is the wildest part of this whole thing. Because we sit here in the U.S. happily snacking on gummies and chips. But the second some of those ingredients cross the Atlantic into the European Union, their regulators, the EFSA, throw up a massive red flag.
Oh, yeah. They do not mess around.
They're like, hold on, this is basically contraband over here. Or at the very least, you have to slap a giant warning label on the front saying, this might cause hyperactivity in your kids.
Which perfectly highlights the entirely different regulatory philosophies at play. And that's what we need to unpack today. Because it begs the question, are we just lacking self-discipline when we eat this stuff? Or have massive food corporations weaponize neuroscience to create commercial traps that we literally can't resist?
That is exactly what we are getting into on today's Sip and Talk. From silicon dioxide and aspartame to the massive regulatory wars between our FDA, Europe, and Asia. So grab your coffee, pop open a sparkling water, and let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So starting with the additives themselves. When you read a label and see something like silicon dioxide, it's so easy to jump to the conclusion that these massive corporations are just, pumping cheap, toxic poison into our food to save a few pennies.
And we really need to correct that misconception right out of the gate because calling UPFs foods with poison in them is actually factually incorrect, and it weakens the real argument against them.
Right, it's more complicated than that.
Much more. These additives aren't poisons. They have highly specific functional purposes for mass industry. We talked about silicon dioxide preventing clumping. But look at emulsifiers. Their entire job is to force oil and water to permanently bind together so your salad dressing doesn't look like a gross, separated science experiment on the shelf.
Which makes sense from a business standpoint.
Exactly. And leavening agents, they're precisely calculated chemical triggers to make sure a cookie puffs up to the exact same millimeter every single time it goes through a massive factory oven.
So basically, as a consumer, you think you're just buying a tasty little afternoon treat. But in reality, you're purchasing a highly stabilized, meticulously engineered industrial supply chain.
That is exactly what you're buying.
The ingredients aren't there to give you nutrients. They're there to make sure the texture survives a 2,000-mile truck ride across the country without spoiling.
Spot on. But here's the catch-all. The danger isn't that one single emulsifier or one specific dye is acutely toxic on its own.
Right.
There was a massive umbrella review published in the British Medical Journal in 2024. They looked at data from 9.9 million people, and they found a direct, undeniable link between high UPF consumption and obesity, type 2 diabetes, and overall mortality.
9.9 million people is a wild sample size.
It is. But the researchers were very clear. You cannot blame a single additive. It's not just the yellow 5 or the emulsifier. Blaming one ingredient is missing the forest for the trees. The danger is the entire ecosystem of the product.
Okay, so if the individual chemicals aren't lethal poisons on their own, why is the overall ecosystem of ultra-processed foods so dangerous? Like, what is actually happening in our biology when we eat this stuff?
What's happening is a hostile takeover of your neurobiology. Look, human beings evolved to seek out specific nutrients to survive. We crave sugar for fast energy, we crave fat for dense calories, and we crave salt for cellular function.
But in the wild, finding all three of those things at the same time is basically impossible.
Exactly. But in an American supermarket, it's on every single shelf. The food industry optimizes for this thing called the bliss point.
The bliss point. Sounds lovely, but I have a feeling it's not.
It's really not. It is a mathematically perfect ratio of sugar, salt, and fat. And it is specifically engineered to spike your brain's dopamine levels to the absolute maximum limit without triggering your sensory-specific satiety.
Okay, wait. Sensory-specific satiety. That's the biological mechanism where your brain is like, all right, I've had enough of this exact flavor. I'm full. Stop eating.
Right.
Precisely. Real whole foods naturally trigger that shutoff valve. An apple triggers it. A piece of chicken triggers it. UPFs are explicitly designed to hack that system and bypass the shutoff valve entirely.
That is terrifying.
And it's not just about the taste. They use visual engineering too. When you see a gummy candy and it's bright yellow, your brain instantly preloads the expectation of lemon. If it's purple, your brain expects grape. They are playing your sensory expectations like a piano to make the reward experience as addictive as possible.
So when people talk about the obesity epidemic and they just blame it on a lack of willpower or personal discipline that is so incredibly unfair, you are literally fighting against thousands of hours of R&D designed to hijack your brain.
You absolutely are, and there's hard science to prove it. Back in 2019, a researcher named Kevin Hall ran a landmark study. They took people and put them in a highly controlled lab environment for a full month.
Like they lived in the lab. Yep, they lived there. For 2 weeks, they fed them an ultra-processed diet, and for the other 2 weeks, a whole food diet. But here is the genius part. They perfectly matched the meals for total calories, total sugar, fat, and fiber. On paper, the nutritional macros were identical.
Oh, wow. So if the macros are exactly the same, you would assume the outcome would be the same. What actually happened?
When the subjects were on the ultra-processed diet, they unconsciously ate an extra 500 calories a day.
500 extra calories, without even trying.
Without even realizing it. Because UPFs are softer, they're hyperpalatable, and they bypass that satiety signal we talked about. People just physically ate faster and consumed more volume before their stomachs could even tell their brains they were full.
Okay, bringing it back to our tech scene over here, that makes so much sense. The food companies aren't sitting in a supervillain lair trying to actively poison us. They're just treating our stomachs exactly the way a Silicon Valley dev treats a smartphone app.
That's an amazing way to look at it.
Right. They are optimizing the UI, the user interface of the food, the crunch, the color for maximum user engagement. Their goal is repeat usage to hit their KPIs. If an app keeps you scrolling for 3 hours, it's a success. If a bag of chips keeps you eating until your fingers hit the plastic at the bottom, the food chemist did their job perfectly.
Exactly. In economics, they call that incentive alignment. The free market massively rewards food that tastes amazing, costs pennies to make, and sits on a shelf for 2 years without rotting. The companies don't have to be evil, they just have to follow the profit metrics.
But the downside of that metric chasing is that we all get sick.
Right. And another BMJ study from 2023 actually showed that 14% of adults now show clinical patterns of food addiction. They exhibit the exact same behavioral markers and loss of control as someone addicted to nicotine.
That is just, wow, 14%. So if these massive global corporations are just ruthlessly optimizing for profit, who is acting as the firewall for the consumer? Which brings us to the governments. Let's look at how we handle this here in the U.S. What is our FDA actually doing?
Well, our approach in the U.S. is heavily based on balancing risk assessment with market efficiency. We use the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA.
Right.
And the philosophy in Washington isn't to just ban every chemical that might theoretically have a risk. Instead, they required facilities to identify hazards and create preventive controls.
So it's basically innocent until proven guilty for food additives.
Largely, yes. We have the GRAS classification, generally recognized as safe, unless there is hard, indisputable scientific data proving an additive is harmful at normal human exposure levels. Our government allows it. We prioritize keeping the food supply chain cheap, abundant, and efficient unless a massive red flag pops up.
Which is such a contrast to Europe. I mean, they operate in a completely different reality. They use the precautionary principle. If our system is innocent until proven guilty, the EU is basically running a pre-crime division for snacks.
Pre-crime is the perfect word for it. In the EU, if they even suspect a risk, like let's say a new study suggests a food dye might cause hyperactivity in kids, even if the data isn't 100% conclusive, the EU will mandate these massive warning labels or just ban it outright while they wait for more data.
And the traceability is nuts.
Oh, extreme traceability. If a bad batch of berries pops up, they don't just know what country it came from. They can track it to the exact farm, the specific harvest batch, and pull it off the specific grocery store shelves in hours. The burden of proof is totally on the manufacturer.
And then you jump over to Asia, and it's a whole different ballgame. Japan has a super pragmatic approach.
Japan is fascinating. They focus heavily on risk communication. They actually openly tell their citizens, look, absolute zero risk doesn't exist. You could choke on a natural peanut. Their goal is to manage the risk scientifically, but they don't lie and promise a magical zero-risk utopia.
And then there's China, which, on paper, has incredibly strict standards. Their GB standards are intense. But the issue there isn't the rulebook in Beijing. It's the massive gap between the written law and the actual local execution on the ground.
Exactly, because food safety isn't just about printing a strict rulebook. It's a multiplication formula. It's the standard times the inspection capability times local enforcement times corporate compliance. If any of those is a zero, the whole system fails.
So we have the U.S. waiting for hard data, Europe banning things on suspicion, and Asia doing its own thing. What happens when a product actually crosses a border? Do we just suddenly live in different biological realities?
To see exactly what happens when these philosophies violently collide, we just have to look at what happened a few weeks ago. The July 2026 Taiwan cooking oil incident.
Oh, this case study is the perfect example. Walk us through what happened in Taiwan.
So, late June, early July of 2026. A massive food supplier in Taiwan, Zhonglian Oil, voluntarily reports to the health authorities that a batch of their processed soybean oil contained 8.1 micrograms per kilogram of a contaminant called BAP.
BAP, let's clarify that real quick, because it's not like an additive they just poured in on purpose.
No, BAP is an environmental contaminant. It's a chemical byproduct created during the high-temperature processing of edible oils. It's linked to long-term carcinogenic risks. Because of that, Taiwan has a very strict legal limit. Their ceiling is 2.0 micrograms per kilogram.
So this batch was at 8.1. That is 4 times their legal limit.
Exactly. And the Taiwanese authorities didn't hesitate. They ordered an immediate massive recall, pulled everything off the shelves, halted production, and launched a massive investigation into the entire downstream supply chain. It was a huge national scandal.
But here is the incredible irony of all this. When the news broke, Chinese netizens started heavily mocking Taiwan online, making fun of them for having toxic oil. But if you actually pull up China's own National Food Safety Rulebook, the GB 2762/2022 standard, you find something absolutely wild.
What's their limit?
China's legal limit for BAP is 10 micrograms per kilogram. meaning the exact same bottle of oil that caused a massive national crisis and a total recall in Taiwan would be completely legal and sitting right on the shelf in a supermarket in China.
It sounds crazy, but as analysts, we have to look at this objectively. This doesn't mean China's food is toxic. What it means is that different nations use completely different scientific exposure models.
Because it's not just about the chemical, it's about how much of it the population actually eats in their daily diet.
Exactly. If a country's baseline diet uses significantly more cooking oil every single day, their baseline exposure to trace contaminants is much higher. So their regulators have to set the legal threshold much lower to prevent cumulative harm. It's a population-wide mathematical equation.
And I think Taiwan's response showed exactly how a resilient system should actually work. They didn't just ban the one bottle and call it a day.
No, they traced it all the way up the global agricultural chain. And they found out it wasn't malicious. The issue was that soybeans from Brazil have different moisture profiles compared to soybeans from the U.S. So the Brazilian beans needed much stricter heat controls during processing, and the factory hadn't adjusted their equipment for the different crops.
This is where I think the smoke detector analogy is just perfect. Food safety regulations aren't a magical force field. They're a smoke detector. Taiwan's smoke detector is calibrated to go off at a 2. China's is calibrated for a 10. And a working system doesn't mean you never have a fire. It means when the alarm goes off, you know exactly how to put it out, and you find out who left the stove on so it doesn't happen again.
That is the perfect way to look at it. It's an adaptive defense mechanism.
But okay, let's bring this down to the individual level. Because as a listener, you cannot control the global soybean supply chain. You can't rewrite FDA regulations. So how do you actually defend yourself when you're just standing in the grocery store aisle trying to buy a snack?
The biggest thing is do not paralyze yourself. You don't need a PhD in chemistry to buy groceries. You just need to spot the major red flags. If you look at an ingredients list and see high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, or if sugar or processed oil are in the top 3 ingredients, just put it back.
Simple enough.
And actively avoid the ultimate bliss point combo. If you see MSG monosodium glutamate paired with artificial flavors and artificial dyes, you can be absolutely certain that product was engineered in a lab specifically to bypass your satiety signals and make you overeat.
What about the diet hacks? Like, people think they can just outsmart the system by buying zero sugar UPFs.
That is a massive trap. Sugar-free does not equal healthy. Usually, that means they swap sugar for aspartame or sucralose. And the World Health Organization recently put out guidelines specifically warning people not to rely on those for long-term weight control. They still disrupt your metabolic responses, and they keep your baseline craving for hyper-sweet foods incredibly high. You aren't breaking the addiction, you're just swapping the chemical.
Okay, here's a ground-level strategy that I personally use because we have to live in the real world. It's the 80-20 rule. You aim for 80% whole, single-ingredient foods, real meat, real veggies, and 20% is for joy and convenience. But the secret to making it work is using physical friction.
Break that down. How does physical friction work?
It's all about environmental design.
Yeah.
Just do not keep UPFs inside your house. If it's 9 p.m., you're on the couch, and you really want a bag of artificially dyed, highly processed chips, force yourself to put on your shoes, grab your wallet, and walk down the street to buy them. 9 times out of 10, your sheer laziness will completely overset that chemically engineered craving.
That's brilliant. You are literally counter-hacking your own brain's reward system.
Let your laziness become your health defense. If it's not in the pantry, you won't eat it just because you're bored.
I love that. And, tying all this together, the science, the regulations, the personal habits, it really leaves you with a deeply provocative thought for the next time you're in the supermarket.
Late on.
When a massive global corporation understands your brain's dopamine reward system better than you do, is their product actually serving you, or is it utilizing you? If a product is totally legal, cheap to make, and safe from bacteria, but it is fundamentally engineered to make you chronically overeat and develop metabolic disease, is that a highly successful business product or a catastrophic public health failure?
Wow. That is a heavy, critical question to chew on. And I think that's the exact lens we all need to be using. And hey, just as a quick disclaimer for everyone listening, today's episode wasn't about bashing any specific country's policies or attacking any specific group of people. We just took an objective look at the facts and the science to encourage some independent critical thinking.
Absolutely. Understanding the system is how you protect yourself.
Exactly. All right, Sip and Talkers, if you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to Sip and Talk wherever you get your podcasts. And also, a massive shout out to our good friend Mickey. Make sure you head over to YouTube and check out his channel, Mickey to Life, For all his latest travel vlogs, he's always posting great stuff.
Yeah, definitely go check Mickey's channel out.
All right, stay curious, keep reading those ingredient labels, and we will see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.